to another entry in the CELS lecture series for 2018. Today we have Surmick, who's the Director of Photography at the Press Democrat, going to tell us about how drones are altering how stories are told visually in the news business. Next week we will have Ryan Jenkins from Cal Poly talking to us about the social and political and philosophical implications of autonomous weapons, many of which are drones themselves, so these two talks will go together quite well, I think. So looking forward to this, and let's give Chad a warm welcome.
Hey guys, how's it going? I'll be your drone pilot for today. My name's Chad. I work for the Press Democrat. I'm the director of photography there. We just won the Pulitzer Prize this last year, and we couldn't be more proud. You know, it's for something that we don't particularly want to win it for, and if we could give it back, we would, but we can't change the course of history. So the people that I work with are really courageous and tenacious and just amazing, and I'm just so proud to be part of their world. And part of that world of covering the fires was drones. And aerial photography in general for newspapers has been something really, really important because it just gives you a different perspective of what's going on. It's not a map, it's not a graphic, it's not a locating thing. It's something you can visually, viscerally feel. And when we first started doing aerial photography with newspapers, it was all fixed wing aircraft. So you were in an airplane, you'd have to call up a pilot, find the time to get the pilot to go fly it, get the right aircraft to fly the thing, and then find your property or your disaster scene or whatever that you're going to fly. And then once you get there, you've got to troubleshoot the whole thing, fly it several times, do orbits after orbit, then get back to the airport, get your film back to the newspaper, process it, then get it into the newspaper. Then came helicopters, where basically we say, hey, we're at this scene. Can you get a helicopter down to the Petaluma River? We've got a well trapped there. We need some aerial photography on this thing because we cannot get to where this thing is on the banks of the river. So once helicopters became prevalent in news photography and even like TV photography, TV news coverage and radio, traffic reporting, we could go anywhere, but it was a huge cost. It's just amazing how expensive a helicopter is because of all the moving parts and how much you have to maintain the thing. And the skill to fly a helicopter is it's greater than a private pilot or a fixed wing pilot. So finding that skill set that can actually hover in the right spot for you to shoot was really difficult, and it was really exorbitant. We would literally go to other agencies and go, okay, we can pay for this part of the airplane or the helicopter. If you can pay for the pilot, and if you can pay for the hours to do this, then we can all get together and share the photography from that particular mission. Then drones came along, and micro photography and micro RC things. So that changed the whole ball game because now we didn't need a pilot, we didn't need an aircraft, we didn't need a third person to get our job done. We could just throw it to a photographer who's trained to fly a drone and do the same thing so cost efficiently and so much quicker. We could literally port this stuff through Facebook Live and have real-time drone video coming to you at any time we want, as long as we have a good connection. So part of what I do at the Press Democrat is I'm the director of photography, so basically all the visuals that go in the newspaper, the magazine, or the website fall under my purview, and my big job is to basically develop stories with reporters and editors that are visual in nature. We don't want to be chasing stuff that's just going to be a bad photograph because no one wants to look at bad photography anymore. People's visual lexicon, their vocabulary for visuals has become so much greater since iPhones have come on the scene and micro cameras, because you can have cameras everywhere and anywhere. So that's what we kind of tapped into. So my job is to basically figure out what's going to be a good picture. Let's put our resources there. And most of what we do, good pictures don't just happen. Some of them do, but the majority of them are research. So my whole mantra is you need an 80% chance going into that photo shoot. The other 20% is you to make it successful. But if we've got you at the right time of day with the right people in the right situation, it's up to the photographer to come out with that particular image. And so it's the same thing with drone photography. You want to find the right location, the right time of day, the right light, the right place to fly it. And what I do in particular is I'll go to Google Earth and I'll research the site way before I even get there, so I know exactly the way the buildings sit. And with satellite imagery now, it's amazing what you can get out of the world just by sitting at your desktop. You don't have to have all this research department. It's all inside your computer. So the cool part is that once you get on scene, then you kind of just look around and go, okay, so how are we going to fly this? How are we going to communicate to our readers what's the best visual for this story? So this is where we begin. We've gone from airplanes to helicopters to now personally flown drones. I'm an FAA certified drone pilot. I'm also a private pilot. Any drone pilots in the place? Do you fly drones just for fun? Anybody at all? You should. It's really cool. You have a lot of fun with them. So this was the very first photograph ever taken by a drone that was published in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. And this particular story is about this swath of property that runs through Santa Rosa where back in the 70s they were going to build a freeway. And this freeway was going to literally go over Spring Lake. They would build a bridge over Spring Lake, and it's just going to be wonderful for everybody. Well, they figured that probably wasn't really so wonderful for the ecology and of the lake. So though that property was sold off by the state, and it's now become a development for housing. This is the first time that we could really show what people could see, where houses would be from here all the way down to Farmers Lane. And we couldn't do this with a fixed wing aircraft because we can't get this low. We can't do this with a helicopter. We have to stay 1,000 feet above populated areas. But with drones, you're all the way from the ground to 400 feet, which gives you a much more intimate look at the world. It also just gives you much more detail, and that vanishing point, that visceral three-dimensional scene is so much easier to capture with a drone than a helicopter because you're shooting with a longer lens which compresses everything. If you guys know anything about photography, the longer the lens is, it's going to compress everything. The wider the lens is, it's going to be more like a fisheye, sort of like your field of vision. So that's the very first picture we took, and this is how it was used in the newspaper on the front page. So as you know, we have a huge housing crisis in Sonoma County. A lot of what we do with the drone, because we don't have a graphics department any longer that builds maps that tells you exactly where in the county this place is related to roads, we're using the drone to basically fulfill that role since we no longer have those people. And I think it works really well. So as we go along here, another big property is this Shenate Road property that has just been, the county sold it off. It went to lawsuit. It's now been, they're rethinking it. They've abandoned their ideas at this point, but it's still in play for housing. So what we do, we're showing people housing. So this is a huge property, 80 acres that needs to be developed for housing for people near a fire zone. Here's another piece of property that's being developed for housing in the middle of Santa Rosa. This is the old water agency off of College Avenue. But that's a really big building, a huge piece of property. How do you show that to readers? Well, this was a Sunday page. These are all the places where we want to build housing, but we can't in this community, which is a real issue for us. So we've got the Shenate Road housing project, the water agency, and then there was the Roseland Camp Michaela, where they had the homeless for so long that they've moved them all out, which now has become a bigger problem because they're all along our trails and whatnot. So there's no solution for that, and that's part of the housing issue. And so showing everybody just sort of what's at stake here visually just gets it in your mind about how immense this problem really might be. Then we get to the fun stuff, and we're like, oh my God, the world's largest jumpy is coming to Santa Rosa. We got to get an aerial of that, right? And so this thing was so cool and so big, and what we try and do, like on this one, the idea here is to shoot on an oblique to give you that three-dimensional feel. But not everything is going to be a lead photograph in the newspaper, because the kids jumping on the thing is a much better visual. It gets you so much more intimate. The kids are having so much more fun, but that drone shot gives you the where the hell are we picture. That's what I like to call it. Just, hey, where are we in the world? And that just says the world's largest jumpy in the middle of that big concert venue that they have at the fairgrounds. Another thing that more housing and more just the look at our community. This is Railroad Square with the train coming into the station. The land at the bottom of the frame has all been sold off to a development company. They're going to develop houses in that as well. So you can see this as a newspaper. Not everything's droneable, but certain important stories that don't have great visuals really benefit from this because it gives you a sense of place. It gives you some light. It gives you some nice descending lines, and then you can just really tell exactly what we're talking about. And in that vein, flying a drone over the city of Santa Rosa did not come that easy. we had the drone in our possession for a year, and we had applied for the waiver to fly the drone for a news organization. And in the time that we applied for that waiver, they changed the rules that they wanted people to operate under. And they said, okay, look, we're not going to provide waivers any longer. We're going to put together this licensing system called Part 107, which is an unmanned aerial vehicle commercial license. And to obtain that, you have to take basically a written test that is tantamount to basically going to a ground school for a private pilot's license. That's that complicated with weather and airport markings and air traffic control and all kinds of things, because basically you're a pilot flying in the national airspace system. And for the government, for the FAA to finally open it up, they decided on this professional track to get people into it. And when we were first starting off, we called the city of Santa Rosa because they were revamping Courthouse Square, and we're like, look, no one has seen Courthouse Square like this. It's been pulled apart. We've closed it off. We're doing construction. We called the city attorney and said, hey, we're going to fly a drone over Courthouse Square. He said, no, you're not. I said, yeah, we are. No, you're not, because we have policies. Well, they don't have policies in place. Basically, the airspace in the national airspace system in America starts from the ground all the way up. So if your grass blades are yours, but everything from there on up is owned by the national government, by the national airspace system. As a licensed pilot, I can fly anywhere I want as long as there's not a restriction designated by either the FAA or Homeland Security or some other government agency. So what happened is, once we got this conversation going with the city attorney, he turned to law enforcement and Captain Craig Swartz over at the City of Santa Rosa Police Department, and he's like their drone program manager. And he said, Craig, can they actually do this? He said, yeah, man, they can. This is part of the deal. And this guy's really cool, because he's also a pilot as well, and he's writing a master's thesis on drones. And with that sort of conflict between the press and the lawyers for the city, it opened up this whole public trust that once we flew this thing over, once we did this, that we flew over Courthouse Square. This is one of our photographers, and typically you can't fly over people, but he had a hard hat on and he's part of the flight crew. So once we literally flew this, they opened up the dialogue for the public trust of flying drones in the city of Santa Rosa. And literally the police department, the city attorney got together and established public safety and public trust rules for drones for the law enforcement. And without that, they would not have been able to do it if we did not fly this flight and push the envelope. And it's not, this is one of our very first flights. It's not very exciting or sexy or anything. And I'm not that good a pilot when I did this. But what it did is it opened up this door that had been closed for so long, and there was all this mystery about, can you fly a drone over public spaces? Well, yeah, you can, because it's part of the public airspace. So like I said, it's just sort of this innocuous look at this courthouse square, but we hadn't seen it like this before, and you can't get this view from a building, and the rolling cinematic motion, you can't get that anywhere else either. So it's a great tool for just showing where you are and how your city is being developed and what's going on with it. So that opened up a lot of places for us to go. And let me get back to, sorry guys. Okay, so and that's how we use that particular image. And again, housing. We use the drone a lot for housing, like I said, because we don't have map makers any longer. So I'm bringing you back kind of full circle. So now we're kind of getting into things where from the ground you can't see this, but visually, man, this is such a great thing. This is a Petaluma pumpkin patch, and this guy cuts this thing by hand every year, and it's different every year, and it's just a great visual from the air. And I shot this thing like a week before the fires, but we were holding on to it to get closer to Halloween, but then the fires hit. And in the middle of all this, I also flew a lot of the fire zones, and not particularly during the actual fire, because number one, that's illegal and dangerous. It's selfish. It puts people at risk in the air that are trying to fight the fire, on the ground that are trying to fight the fire, and it's just a bad idea. So we kept the drone down, but we did have a helicopter up the first day. With that said, when this thing finally did run, we were like a week into the fires, and we had finally just gotten to Coffee Park, and this was the first sort of stuff that we flew in Coffee Park. That would be the first drone shot of the fires that we published. It just happened to fall on the same day we published the corn maze. So that's journalism, man. You can wait all day long and have a great picture that you want to run really big and have some impact in the newspaper, but then news overruns you and tragedy just takes a hold. And that's kind of where we were. So what I did is, once the TFRs were lifted in Coffee Park was still underneath Class Delta airspace. Class Delta airspace is controlled airspace by the tower in Santa Rosa at the airport. And you cannot fly a drone in Class Delta airspace without a waiver, and a waiver takes 90 days. Well, did I know this fire was going to happen 90 days before? No, not at all. So what we had to do was make a case to the local FAA office in Oakland and tell them, look, we have a licensed pilot, a privately licensed pilot, a drone licensed pilot who will fly this. If we want 10 minutes, we want this altitude, we want this. It's for the newspaper. It's for this. It's got to be done. And they saw our point of view and said, great, you have 10 minutes, no longer anything else. We're going to bust you guys. So we flew it as quickly as we possibly could. And it just so happened that when I was flying that, Captain Craig Swartz was down there, the drone pilot for the cops in Santa Rosa, came up and shook my hand and said, man, you guys opened up the door for us to fly drones and all this stuff. So it was really a cool little moment just to jump in there. And after everything we did, we literally had the thing on the shelf for a year, got through the waiver process, they canceled the waiver process, then we went through the drone training process of getting a Part 107 pilot, finally getting the thing flying. We get the fires come to us, and we just go crazy. I mean, I was there for maybe 10 minutes, and this is the content that I was able to pull out of there. It's just amazing. It's just like a bomb went off. And you can't get this from a helicopter. You can't get this from a plane. It's so much lower and so much more intimate to really see the cars that are burned up and the sheds and the outline of people's houses versus just these blocks of gray. And that's how this was a Sunday page one of how are people going to get back into Coffee Park. This is before they even had a plan of cleaning the place up, rebuilding, or anything. It was just still stuck in limbo, waiting for them to clear the toxins and whatnot. This was Fountain Grove. They had flight restrictions over Fountain Grove for the longest time because they're battling the blazes off in Sonoma, and they're flying air tankers basically over Fountain Grove into the fire zones. So Fountain Grove was shut down for, man, it was like 3 weeks after the fire started. So it took us a long time to get in there, but once we did, it was just amazing, the devastation that we saw. Because Coffee Park is something that you can see from one vantage point. This Fountain Grove, you have to drive through all these hills, and it's just so amazing how far out and spread out all these homes were up in Fountain Grove. I really didn't have an idea of how many were really there. This is Rincon Ridge. This is like the first place that got scorched off of that ridge line. And this is where we used it. We're using a photo page to wrap up for the Fountain Grove coming back to clean up their homes. And so basically I have photographers shooting from the ground, and then I would shoot the aerial stuff. And this is just a comparison of where we were at one point in the fires, the very first couple weeks. And then this is how we used it. As part of we're trying to compare the Tubbs fire to the Handley fire way back when it kind of burned the same thing, and this was just a visual to help along with that. One of the really amazing stories is these islands, these fire islands, right? These houses that survived when nothing else did in this environment. And even though it's a dramatic picture, it's what's happening inside the homes that really is what we're trying to tell people about. This is just to tell you what these people went through. But this is a man who has Alzheimer's, and that's his caretaker who lives in the home. There's no one else left in that neighborhood. It's just those two. And this is their life now. This was the very first home built back in Coffee Park. So we're kind of transitioning out of the fire into the rebuilding. But this is literally the very first home that was completed. And this is how we did it. We did a rebuild section in the newspaper we're doing it every month. We're continuing it through the first of the year to get people one place where they can go to find out what's happening, man. What's up with insurance? What's up with this place? What's up with that? And it's a really great resource for people who are trying to get back on their feet. So as we go along here, Coffee Park basically starts building homes. Fountain Grove starts selling off lots because everything's toxic. So every single one of these lots in this cul-de-sac was sold off by their owners. No one's going to populate that who lived there before. They don't want to come back. And this is part of the story that we're trying to tell, that people just are not going to return. Again, these are like the house on the right survived the fire. Everything else burned down around it. They're trying to rebuild the house on the left. This was just a where are we now 3 months later. Up to the upper right corner, you can kind of see Coffee Park. Upper right, about a third back in there, that kind of gray spot. And that's how we use that. And again, this is just sort of a comparison of where this neighborhood was right after the fires. This was the spring, just the spring. I haven't shot this in a while, but just the difference. And nothing's being built in Fountain Grove. So that's kind of where my coverage for the still end of the drone stuff ends. The thing that we found is that the drone's great for video in certain storytelling situations, but we're finding it more valuable for still photography to get us these scene setters and sort of these dramatic destruction type things. So let me take you back to the first kind of stuff that we did shoot with the drone. What I did is I shot Coffee Park and Fountain Grove and posted video. And what I do, it's just because we're literally working 17-hour days trying to get this stuff out. I would just throw it onto YouTube with no video production. I mean, no production, no sound, no production value whatsoever. A DJ in near Nashville, Ken Heron, he's like a drone pilot guy who's really an advocate for Part 107 to do drone flying right. Picked up on my videos and cut this one for us. And this just gives you a sense of what we did. Whoop, where'd you go? During the fires. It's still really hard to watch. The building with the America, the United States of America in it, that was my son's school. That was Hidden Valley Satellite School. And he was a kindergartner there, and he lost his class and had to move to another school. So I live at Shenate and Hidden Valley, sort of right in that area, so it was real close to us. My family did leave in the middle of the night. No warning, I woke up smelling smoke and told them to leave because I could see fire and knew we had to go to work. And that's what we did. As we went through the anniversary, I had this desire to be able to show what was there before and what's there now. And we didn't have the footage of Coffee Park or really Fountain Grove to do that. But what I did find is that Google Earth is an amazing program that if you take the sensibilities of aerial photography and drone pilotage and data processing and storytelling, you can do stuff like this, where you can combine databases to see the rise and fall of a neighborhood. So we have, this is what it looks like now, and then you'll see it morph back up from a year ago, just before the fires. The scene was so big I couldn't figure out a way to film it with conventional drones, so satellite imagery and their 3D imagery is what we came up with. A lot of lives changed that night and in a matter of hours, and that's just still, I had no idea that it was, I mean, I've driven through there and you can see it, but putting it all together in one flight, and we basically just flew Fountain Grove Parkway and around. Because everything's hidden by trees and it's in gullies and the terrain hides it all. That one blew me away, that we could basically take these two databases to combine them and see exactly what happened in a neighborhood a year later. So then I just want to leave you guys with this one last video. It's not all doom and gloom with the drone. My whole purpose with this is, yes, we'll cover the housing crisis, and yes, we'll cover natural disasters, but I really want to be able to figure out a long form way of telling stories with the drone and the drone only. So shortly after the fires, I filmed this thing just to get out of the rut of looking at fire imagery and to find something really uplifting and beautiful about Sonoma County. And I came up with this idea to match a quote that's always been a favorite of mine from Amelia Earhart that is, "You've never seen a tree until you've seen its shadow from the sky." So this is kind of what inspired this video. So that is what we do with drones at the Press Democrat. And my goal is to do more stuff like the Vineyard, not so much terrible things like fires. And to do more long form storytelling, like that was more of like a photo study of a vineyard, really, in a visual terms of moving photography and audio that leads you into certain feelings and whatnot. The last thing I'm going to tell you guys is that the rules for drones are changing. The Congress just authorized wide sweeping changing rules. The biggest that people are really upset about is if you fly a drone commercially or even privately, you have to have a privacy policy that people can check into about how long you can keep your footage. It basically comes down to privacy concerns. They're going to ask you for a policy of how long you keep it, what you're going to be doing with that footage, and where it's going to go. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. The one caveat in all that is they lay out all these rules about privacy, and then there's this one line that says if this is being if the drone flight is being operated under First Amendment considerations, then they're exempt from any privacy policies, because journalists have basically are entrusted with the public trust, and our ethics basically supersede that policy, that we'll do the right thing with it, and that you will have access to it because it's a newspaper and it's basically public in that regard. That's it, man. That's drones at the Press Democrat. Any questions, anything at all? How to get there, how not to get there, what to do, what not to do? Anybody?
So how long did it actually take you to get your license to fly?
So what I had to do is there were two roads we had to go down. The first one was the FAA had to authorize us as a commercial drone pilot agency to fly. Well, they figured out that they had 400,000 applications. They couldn't possibly process all of them. So they said, okay, we'll make new rules. We'll make people take a test, and then we'll give you your license. And that test is basically a ground pilot school license for private pilots license. I'm already a private pilot. So what I had to do to get my license is I had to take my logbook in to a flight instructor, show him my license, show him that I had a biannual flight review, which means an instructor flew with me over the last 2 years, and then I had to take a safety course. Then the instructor looks at all that and goes, okay, yeah, that's real. Then he sends it into the FAA and they approve it. The other way is you just take a test at a Sylvan Learning Center and they send you the license if you pass it. And it's, it's a pretty extensive test. You only have to get 70% right, but truly, once you've taken this test, you have 80% of the ground school to be a private pilot. And that's what they're trying to do. The way I was trained as a private pilot, I know what that guy's going to do because he was trained the same way I was, assuming he's going to follow what he was trained. People are being trained all different ways in drones, and they're trying to bring that into line. So now what's going to happen is even with hobbyists, they're going to make you take a test before you can fly your drone. And they're going to make the manufacturers install these tests on the drones, communicate back to the manufacturer that you've done this, and that all their paperwork has to be available to the FAA. So things are going to be changing. Like the drone I fly, this is the Phantom 3. This is 3 generations old. This has no collision avoidance. The only thing that has two sensors that will keep you from dropping into water, but that's it. Everything now has sensors here and here, and the FAA is going to require all drones to have these anti-collision avoidance systems built in them. So this thing's going to be obsolete probably in a year once they enact those rules. So we'll have to upgrade, and everyone will have to upgrade their drones to those sorts of things. Yes?
How much is like one of those drones?
So literally, like this is the Phantom Pro 3. You can get one of these now because they're 2 or 3 generations old. They're only $800, right, for that thing. A really decent drone with all the bells and whistles, you're looking at about, if you're not doing like movie making, if you're just doing the stuff we're doing, about $2,000. The Phantom 4 Pro 2 is where a lot of people are going. They've got the Mavics, who are a little bit smaller, they're a little bit more portable, but the sensors aren't quite the same on the Pros. What everyone's waiting for is the Phantom 5, but that's like this rumor mill kind of thing. So you're like, well, geez, where do I spend my money? Where do I spend money? I'm always the guy who wants to buy 1 or 2 models back because all the bugs have been worked out. You don't have to worry about updates constantly, and it's a tried and true model. You get it at like half the price, so you can basically learn or do whatever you need to do, and then move up to the next grade. It's sort of the way we do it. Any other questions?
Yeah, if you're interested in getting a license, the JC has a really good class that will prepare you for the exam, kind of over-prepare you for the exam, and also give you some flight time on drones. It's fantastic. We're trying to get a class like that here at Sonoma State, but we have different regulations, which is preventing us from doing some things. But we're also getting, I think, 6 drones, not these, but a different company that's being gifted to the university here, and they have the full collision avoidance. I did a test flight on them a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to crash it. Yeah. And it was impossible. I mean, I was trying to run it into myself and buildings and trees, and you can't not fly that thing. That thing mostly flies itself. And it has an okay camera. It's not as good as that. It's fine, but it's a great platform to kind of learn how to do this stuff with. And we're going to be having a bunch of those available. Great. That you'll just, as students, like if you want to, you can think of a project you need it for. We're going to have a room. You just go check it out. And that's great. Yeah, the thing I found out, because we did a symposium at the JC about, how can you work drones into a curriculum, and the thing that people are like, oh, drones are going to be like the next biggest thing in the world, and you'll be able to make all kinds of money, and it'll be great. No, it's awesome. Well, the reality is, like, really, you need to have another career, and the drone will be part of your career. Right. So I'm a photojournalist and a drone pilot. You're an archaeologist and a drone pilot. Right. You're a construction guy, geologist and a drone pilot. It's just going to be part of your discipline that you'll learn. It's just like photography. Right. Like photography is now inside your pocket. It's coming your way now. It's the same thing. And the thing about DJI and the drones, they're putting in geofencing.
So they will program your drone, and you cannot fly into airspace that's restricted. It will just stop you. It will know where it is GPS wise, and
Right.
it will stop just right there, and you can't hurt anybody or anything except yourself.
Yeah.
So it's amazing the technology that's coming our way. The government has contracts with DJI and basically transmitting data from your drone to law enforcement, and they can now, it's part of Congress, they've put it in the new legislation that they will have these weapons that will take your drone and either fly it away from the scene or bring it to them or crash it all completely. And it's coming our way because they're done with, assassins or down in was that Venezuela,
Venezuela, right.
where people fly drones and blow them up and with C4.
Yeah, exactly. So while we're on that subject, maybe this is one thing I really want to talk about today, is the upcoming FAA appropriations bill, which inside of that, it's just a mundane kind of, here's some money for the FAA, but inside of it is a provision allowing law enforcement agencies to, on their discretion, take out a drone either with these things you're talking about, or even just a shotgun, right?
Right.
One thing I want to talk about is from the news perspective, one interesting application of drone in the news recently has been no photography is allowed in the detention centers for the people taken on the border. But some photojournalists figured out a way to get drone footage of that, right? So now if this appropriations bill comes into being, right, that this will have a First Amendment impact in that the guards at these facilities could just shoot the drone down, and therefore we don't get to see what our tax dollars are being used for.
Right, they're leaving it up to law enforcement on scene to make that decision.
Right.
And there are no guidelines.
Yeah, no judge, nothing, right? It's just some guy,
If
the
they feel-
officer with a shotgun
Right.
just decides.
If they feel it's a threat to their operation, then they have that right now to do that. So you're right. There will probably be a couple of court fights over that one, I would assume. CNN is the only person that I know of that can actually fly drones over people, and they've been on the forefront of this. I would assume they would be the first to jump in line,
Right.
kind of thing. But it's us little guys. We can only fight once the big dogs get in and start
Yeah.
helping change legislation. So then we just have to follow the rules.
Right. Yeah, so it's going to be, what you're saying is basically going to be up to the big media corporations. They're going to have to do something where they get shot down, and then it has to go to court.
Right.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is was our photography more for the public good, or was their investigation more for the public good, and the judge has to decide that,
Right.
and transparency. And if you're a public agency, how much do you need to how much information do you need to provide to media and to the public, versus how much can they keep secret?
Yeah, and then next week we'll hear more about, systems not much bigger than that can be quite lethal. And this is sort of the balance, right? The fear, like how do we protect ourselves against these coming swarm of weapons, and still carve a space out for legitimate news.
Yeah, because the San Jose Police Department are looking to micro drones, right?
Right.
For basically flying into a hostage situation, being able to fly into a room, observe it quickly, turn the thing off, and you'll know exactly where everything is or where everybody is.
Right.
And you can port that into everybody's device, and you've got battlefield awareness like that.
Right.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And so they can be quite small, right? They can fly within the interior.
Yeah, we've been playing with some of these. They call them tiny ones from micro drones, where they have a TV transmitter on it. You fly with goggles or a display of some sort, but the signature on that TV signal is so strong it actually knocks out the Wi-Fi in the room as well.
Oh wow.
So it's like a dual purpose device.
Yeah.
A little EMP going on.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very interesting. Any other questions? I've got more. I can keep you busy all day.
Since the capability of drone photography has drastically enhanced the public's understanding of these stories, do you think there's been a significant difference in the public perception of them?
I think so. I think because they can see, everyone expects a drone photo now, or drone shot. Any commercial you watch is going to have a drone shot in it. Any TV broadcast that has to deal with big natural disasters is going to have a drone. It's just part of your visual lexicon now. You expect to see it. it's just part of what you're going to see, and you expect to see it, and it's part of your I call it the visual vocabulary, but your lexicon of what you can see. But yeah, when I first brought the drone out, I just expected everybody to go, "Whoa, dude, what are you doing? Privacy?" No, people were so curious. They're like, "Oh, that's so cool. You're with the press. Oh, that's great that you're doing this." And I have only had one person have an issue with me because it's an abandoned building, and she didn't know if I was supposed to be there. But once we had a chat, she's like, "Oh, I get it." And so it's being a good drone pilot and making good decisions that keep our name good in the community. It's when you do bad things that put a black eye on everybody. It only takes one person to do that. And it takes a long time to build it all back up again. But our operating procedures are, no, we do it right so that we can do it again tomorrow. And that's the deal.
Yeah, I like the trick that the guy who teaches at Santa Rosa Junior College does. He just puts on like a vest, you know.
Yeah.
And,
Just
and that stops everything, right? Everybody just assumes you're a professional. Right?
Just like
There
this.
you go. Yep.
You got the FAA on your back, no one's gonna mess with you, because I think you're official. And then you're a licensed drone pilot, and you are official for the FAA, but, you know, that's sort of, not a gimmick, but at least it gives you an idea, it gives people an idea of that you're legit,
Right.
as long as, you know, you're legit.
Right. Right. And I think there's a lot of fear of drones, you know, when you see them
What?
flying overhead.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, I'm not gonna fire it up in here, but the thing sounds like a bunch of angry bees, man. When that thing's flying around, there's like this visceral, natural, a primal man thing where you're like, bees? What? And so you're just kind of running around going, what? But it's once you get it far enough up and there's enough construction noise going on, you can't really hear it. But man, that first 100 feet, it's pretty loud. So they're trying to change props. They're molding props and getting quieter props and quieter engines and longer flight times so that you don't have to bring it up and down to put batteries in. That you can fly for an hour and whatever,
Right.
and just stay on station and not bug people. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that the noise of it is really off-putting, and it's the one thing that I really have to watch out, because people definitely have a reaction to it. But yeah, the quieter they are, the better.
Sorry. So I have one last kind of important question to ask, which is, how has your role changed? What I'm noticing is newspapers are kind of turning into magazines and TV stations and everything. Like all media is collapsing into one style, right? So maybe you were trained with still photography, probably,
Right,
I would
right.
assume, right? And now you're moving into basically having to learn how to shoot movies.
Yes.
Right? How has that changed?
So because everybody has a movie camera in their pocket, we got to keep up with social media and Facebook and YouTube and all these things. And so 10 years ago, we made a commitment to train all photographers in video production. And that's when we were shooting on 8mm tape, or you know, the little dudes, before there was digital anything, you know, before they started porting the stuff into your phone and to your camera. So we literally would take a day and do video, and specifically go find video. Now it's just this expected part of what we do in terms of Facebook and YouTube, but it's not a production value, because what we found is you can work all day long and have a really cool, what we call a talkie video that has a lot of emotion and people talking about a certain subject for 20 minutes. No one's going to watch it, man. They just don't. The consumption, the time for people to consume things has changed. It's so much shorter now. So anything that we can get up there that has just a quick hit that gets you the visual of flying through the burn zone, 25 seconds, we'll just post that. We may or may not have music on it. We do a lot of live Facebooking so that we don't have the production value. It's just, you can just see the raw video as we capture it. So it's all content. We just call it content, whether it's for the web, for the magazine, for the newspaper, for whatever. We just collect the content, then we start just splitting it up in portions. This goes to the magazine, this goes to the website, this goes to the newspaper. Oh, all three of these go to the magazine, website, and newspaper. So we pick and choose, but we consume everything we possibly can, and then go from there. But it's stills, video, audio, and there's no video really without audio, because your video really depends on audio to move people. And we just, a lot of times we just don't have time to make that production value work. So we just throw it up there and let other people take care of it for us sometimes.
All right, so I think we're out of time now, so let's give them a hand.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.